So we are in book 3 of Ashwapati's Yoga, and it's the culmination of his role in Savitri, where he goes beyond the borders of what Sri Aurobindo calls the overmind, and he experiences both the presence of the Shakti and the consciousness of the supermind. He experiences it, and it does it. He undergoes a transformation, which is not the full supramental transformation, but something of it. He undergoes a kind of transformation, and he feels the presence of the goddess, of the Divine Mother. And this happens over a period of a few phases or stages. And finally, we arrive at where we are right now, which is Canto 4 of Book 3, after he has the supramental experience and he sees these worlds and their parallels or doubles, and he sees our worlds as the doubles of these supramental worlds. And he is in meditation, seeing himself in a very distant presence, seeing the world which is from the world to be, as it were. From the future, he is looking at the present. And in this condition, he is waiting for something to happen, because he came with this aspiration to call down an intervention. And suddenly he feels the presence of the Divine Mother again. And this brings us to this particular canto. Yes, Samir. We're talking about Ashwapati. Yeah. Ashwapati. So I will draw upon Meera to read this passage.
Then suddenly there rose a sacred stir. Amid the lifeless silence of the void, in a solitude and an immensity, a sound came, quivering like a loved footfall, heard in the listening spaces of the soul. A touch perturbed his fibers with delight. An influence had approached the mortal range. A boundless heart was near his longing heart. A mystic form enveloped his earthly shape. All at her contact broke from silence's seal. Spirit and body thrilled, identified, linked in the grasp of an unspoken joy. Mind, members, life were merged in ecstasy. Intoxicated as with nectareous rain, his nature's fashioning stretches flowed to her, flashing with lightnings, mad with luminous wine. All was a limitless sea that heaved to the moon. A divinizing stream possessed his veins. His body's cells awoke to spirit sense. Each nerve became a burning thread of joy. Tissue and flesh partook beatitude. Alight, the dun unplumbed subconscient caves thrilled with the prescience of her longed-for trade, and filled with flickering crests and praying tongues. Even lost in slumber, mute, inanimate, his very body answered to her power. The one he worshipped was within him now, flame pure, ethereal traced, a mighty face appeared, and lips moved by immortal words, lids wisdom's leaves drooped over rapture's orbs. A marble monument of ponderings shone, a forehead, side-script and large like ocean's gaze. Towards heaven, two tranquil eyes of boundless thought looked into man's and saw the God to come. A shape was seen on threshold mark. A voice, absolute and wise, in the heart's chambers spoke. O Son of Strength, who climbst creation's peaks, no soul is thy companion in the light. Alone thou standest at the eternal doors. What thou hast won is thine, but ask no more. O Spirit, aspiring in an ignorant frame, O voice, arisen from the inconscious world, how shalt thou speak for men whose hearts are dumb, make for blind earth the soul's seer vision's home, or lighten the burden of the senseless globe? I am the mystery beyond reach of mind. I am the goal of the travail of the suns. My fire and sweetness are the cause of life, but too immense my danger and my joy. Awake not the immeasurable descent. Speak not my secret name to hostile time. Man is too weak to bear the infinite's weight. Truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth.
So we find that Ashwapati, in his series of connections or relations with this supramental Shakti, is encountering her and her experiences through the last two cantos. And as he comes to this point, after experiencing the worlds, he experiences her again. He had experienced her in the beginning just after he came out of the world soul, but now he experiences her once again, and she comes into him. And he had almost forgotten why he was here, but she has reminded him, and now she sort of gags him from the very beginning. She says to him, don't ask what you came for, because it's just for you. You can't ask this for humanity, which is not ready, and things will happen in their own time. You are a special case, and you take what you have and you go back. And of course, he's not satisfied with that answer. The interesting thing about this canto is that it shows us the role of the human will, and also tells us something about the nature of what is called surrender. So the thing is that what is the divine will and what is the human will is not something which we know beforehand. But what we are being told is to persist with our will, the deepest will that we have. And so Ashwapati is not going to listen to this call to go back. He will persist, and he will put forth his entire passion, the strength of his will, to contest what he's being told. And as we'll see at the end of that, she will sort of co-opt his voice and say, very good, I agree with, I will obey what you're saying, because I am the one who's spoken through you. I mean, in terms of the ego, that's a kind of like not a very, it's like not a, yeah, it's a takeover. It's not a win-win situation on the divine side, right? But this is how it works. So basically, the lesson that I think Sri Aurobindo is giving over here is surrender. He uses the term active surrender. Surrender means to actually to create a will, an aspiration which is a very firm and strong will, a resolution that can hold its own even against the divine denial, you see, and that at some point can either be completely denied or be affirmed. And that's what happens in this case, where when he has his last say, she affirms it. So, Meera, can we continue?
But Ashwapati's heart replied to her, a cry amid the silence of the vasts. How shall I rest content with mortal days and the dull measure of terrestrial things? I who have seen behind the cosmic mask the glory and the beauty of thy face. Hard is the doom to which thou bindest thy sons. How long shall our spirits battle with the night and bear defeat and the brute yoke of death? We who are vessels of a deathless force and builders of the Godhead of the race. Or if it is thy work I do below, amid the error and waste of human life, in the vague light of mind's half-conscious mind, why breaks not in some distant gleam of thee? Ever the centuries and millenniums pass, where in the greyness is thy coming's ray? Where is the thunder of thy victory's wings? Only we hear the feet of passing gods. A plan in the occult eternal mind, mapped out to backward and prophetic sight, the aeons ever repeat their changeless round, the cycles all rebuild and ever aspire. All we have done is ever still to do.
So that is Ashwapati's response. He makes a very ardent plea, and this goes on for a little bit. There is a little dialogue of this kind, and she comes back, and then finally she speaks. Yeah, and then we read the last one. You have to let her speak.
In the beginning is prepared the close, this strange irrational product of the mire, this compromise between the beast and God, is not the crown of thy miraculous world. I know there shall inform the inconscient self, at one with nature and at height with heaven, a spirit vast as the containing sky, and swept with ecstasy from invisible founts, a God come down and greater by the fall. A power arose out of my slumber's cell, abandoning the tardy limb of the hours and the inconstant blink of mortal sight. There were the thinker sleeps in too much light, and intolerant flames the lone all-witnessing eye, hearing the word of fate from silence's heart. In the endless moment of eternity, it saw from timelessness the works of time. Overpast were the leaden formulas of the mind, overpowered the obstacle of mortal space. The unfolding image showed the things to come. A giant dance of Shiva toward the past. There was a thunder as of worlds that fall. Earth was overrun with fire and the roar of death. Clamoring to slay a world his hunger had made, there was a clangor of destruction's wings. The Titan's battle cry was in my ears. Alarm and rumor shook the armored night. I saw the omnipotent flaming pioneers over the heavenly verge which turns towards life, come crowding down the amber stairs of birth, forerunners of a divine multitude. Out of the paths of the morning star they came, into the little room of mortal life. I saw them cross the twilight of an age, the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn, the great creators with wide brows of calm, the massive barrier breakers of the world, and wrestlers with destiny in her lists of will, the laborers in the quarries of the gods, the messengers of the incommunicable, the architects of immortality. Into the fallen human sphere they came, faces that bore the immortal glory still, voices that communed still with the thoughts of God, bodies made beautiful by the Spirit's light, carrying the magic word, the mystic fire, carrying the Dionysian cup of joy, approaching eyes of a diviner man, lips chanting an unknown anthem of the soul, feet echoing in the corridors of time. High priests of wisdom, sweetness, might and bliss, discoverers of beauty's sunlit ways, and swimmers of love's laughing fiery floods, and dancers within rapture's golden doors. Their trade one day shall change the suffering earth, and justify the light on nature's face. Although fate lingers in the high beyond, and the work seems vain on which our heart's force was spent, all shall be done for which our pain was born. Even as of old man came behind the beast, this high divine successor surely shall come, behind man's inefficient mortal pace, behind his vain labor, sweat and blood and tears. He shall know what mortal mind barely durst think. He shall do what the heart of the mortal could not dare. Inheritor of the toil of human time, he shall take on him the burden of the gods. All heavenly light shall visit the earth's thoughts. The might of heaven shall fortify earthly hearts. Earth's deeds shall touch the superhuman's height. Earth's seeing widen into the infinite.
So this is again in a way Sri Aurobindo's prophetic voice, but it is also Ashwapati's prophetic voice, because Ashwapati has experienced what is to come, and he calls on the Divine Mother to manifest it, to incarnate and make it possible. And so this is what ends that canto. His prayer sank down in the resisting night, oppressed by the thousand forces that deny, as if too weak to climb to the Supreme. But there arose a wide consenting voice. So the Divine Mother affirms his call. The Spirit of Beauty was revealed in sound. Light floated round the marvelous vision's brow, and on her lips the immortal's joy took shape. O strong forerunner, I have heard thy cry. One shall descend and break the iron law, change nature's doom by the lone spirit's power. A limitless mind that can contain the world, a sweet and violent heart of ardent calms, moved by the passions of the gods, shall come. All mights and greatnesses shall join in her. Beauty shall walk celestial on the earth. Delight shall sleep in the cloud net of her hair, and in her body, as on his homing tree, immortal love shall beat his glorious wings. A music of griefless things shall weave her charm. The harps of the perfect shall attune her voice. The streams of heaven shall murmur in her laugh. Her lips shall be the honeycombs of God, her limbs his golden jars of ecstasy, her breasts the rapture flowers of paradise. She shall bear wisdom in her voiceless bosom. Strength shall be with her like a conqueror's sword, and from her eyes the eternal's bliss shall gaze. A seed shall be sown in death's tremendous hour, a branch of heaven transplant to human soil. Nature shall overleap her mortal step, fate shall be changed by an unchanging will. So this is the affirmation of the intervention, of the incarnation of the mother, and she describes the birth, so to say. And this will take us into Savitri's life and journey. And Sri Aurobindo prepares us for Savitri right at the beginning, because we see that that is what the symbol dawn is all about. It's the day that Satyavan will die, and just after the description of the symbol dawn, he describes Savitri to us. Now, one of the reasons why I am reading these passages is, as Matteo has pointed out, Sri Aurobindo, part of Sri Aurobindo's work has been to talk about language, and he has written a book called The Future Poetry, in which he sees how language can become a vehicle for these higher powers. And this is exactly partly what we were talking about in saying that this is like the sound body of Sri Aurobindo's consciousness. And so he has attempted, he has spoken about Savitri partly as an experiment to write from higher and higher states of consciousness, and also to refine and rewrite so that what came through could actually bear the kind of consciousness that he was experiencing. So the passages I've selected are what I feel are his most mantric passages, passages that carry the power of consciousness with which he was experiencing and writing. And the first description, of course, the whole symbol dawn is a very powerful mantric passage, which I will not read, but I encourage you to read it. But it continues to a description of Savitri, which is a very powerful invocation. Some of these invocations have power beyond what they are describing. In other words, just reciting them can change consciousness. There's a place where the mother says, reading Savitri is doing yoga. See? And one of the ashram people, early ashram residents in Sri Aurobindo's time was K.D. Setna. He went by another name, Amal Kiran, which Sri Aurobindo had given him. And he has written about his experience, particularly with this passage of the first description of the mother, where at a time when he had been suffering tremendously physically due to certain ailments. And in reading this, he actually experienced the dissolution of the problem completely in a flash. So this is the description where he begins talking about Savitri. This is page 14. So she is actually in the forest home of Satyavan, and she's woken up and she's recollecting the past, and she remembers the fact that just a year before she had met him at this place and something magical had happened, love had suddenly blossomed. And this is what brings her to the present. And with this, Sri Aurobindo begins describing her. Here with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent. And you'll see this word descent occurring again and again, both in the kind of context we are talking about regarding descents, as well as in some more immediate context. So, here with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the divine descent, changing to rapture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow death. You see, the death is love's shadow in that sense, and this is what happened. And today, in this the day of the symbol dawn, death is going to come to her, just as love had come to her. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine. The he here is love, okay, the Godhead love. Since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, never a rarer creature bore his shaft. That burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss. All in her pointed to a nobler kind, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large-visioned spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the ways of thought to unborn things. Ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will, her mind a sea of white sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbid wave. As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing vault, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn, that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, a golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense. Even in earth stuff and their intense delight, poured a supernal beauty on men's lives. A wide self-giving was her native act, a magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet temperate sun, her high passion a blue heaven's equipoise. As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms, and a quiet reach like a remembered breast in a haven of safety and splendid soft repose, one could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambiance, and preen joy in her warmth and colors rule. A deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary, her inward help unbarred a gate in heaven. Love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell, vacant of the dwarf self's imprisoned air. Her mood could harbor his sublimer breath, spiritual that can make all things divine. For even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire. The strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound. In her he moved as in his natural home. In her he met his own eternity. So, the He over here is the Godhead love. And it's very interesting, the mother talks about this. The mother says, love is a great God, is the highest God actually, the supreme divine. And love as a God power comes to the earth seeking for instruments. And we feel wherever love finds a slight opening, it enters. And we feel that that is a certain kind of greatness, beauty, great atmosphere surrounds us, and we experience love, but we cannot maintain it. We cannot give it the kind of receptacle it needs. So things turn bad and love flies away. It looks for another receptacle. So this is exactly what she's talking about. And so she's talking about, when she's talking about the 4 austerities and the 4 liberations, if you read that passage of hers, this is one entire line of sadhana, the sadhana of love. How can we become receptacles of the divine power of love? What is the the kind of yoga necessary to let that power reside in us? See? And that is one way of reaching the divine, the highest divine, the supreme divine. And that does not abrogate human love of all kinds, of every kind. But the idea is we have to bear the test and do the purification that it needs to actually reside in us. So, Savitri is an embodiment of that power. Because she is an embodiment of that power, she will be chosen to combat death. And this is a great deep occult truth that Sri Aurobindo is presenting here, that this becomes the kind of conflict, the conflict of love and death, which is the name of his earlier poem, that the true repository of love is the power that can actually conquer death. So he goes from here to, now we move to the birth of Savitri, and we talked about the fact that Savitri is born to to Ashwapati and his wife, and she is too great for people to really seek her in marriage. She grows up, and we find that Sri Aurobindo's description shows her to be somebody who is distant from people. Though she comes close to them, they can't meet her response. So this is an early description of Savitri. This is page 356. There is a oneness native and occult that needs no instruments and erects no forms. In unison it grows with all that is. All contacts it assumes into its trance. Laugh-tossed consents to the wind's kiss and takes transmutingly the shocks of sun and breeze. So this is all of nature. There is a certain kind of underlying sense of unity, and one can participate in that. There is a way in which you can experience at certain times the fact that all of nature is one, and there's a relationship between things going on in a sense that is below all our senses. A blissful yearning riots in its leaves, a magic passion trembles in its blooms, its boughs aspire in hushed felicity. An occult Godhead of this beauty is cause, the spirit and intimate guest of all this charm, this sweetness's priestess and this reverie's muse. So this is the power that actually starts working in Savitri. This at a high, heavenlier height was shown in her. Even when she bent to meet earth's intimacies, her spirit kept the stature of the gods. It stooped but was not lost in matter's reign. A word translated was her gleaming mind, and marvel-mooned, bright crowding fantasies fed with spiritual sustenance of dreams the ideal goddess in her house of gold. Aware of forms to which our eyes are closed, conscious of nearnesses we cannot feel, the power within her shaped her moulding sense in deeper figures than our surface types. An invisible sunlight ran within her veins and flooded her brain with heavenly brilliances that woke a wider sight than earth can know. Outlined in the sincerity of that ray, her springing childlike thoughts were richly turned into luminous patterns of her soul's deep truth, and from her eyes she cast another look on all around her than man's ignorant view. So we are shown Savitri growing up, a scout of victory in a vigil tower, her aspiration called high destiny down. So again we see, even in Savitri's case, this is the reality. She is constantly calling something higher to come down. Her aspiration called high destiny down. A silent warrior paced in her city of strength, inviolate, guarding truth's diamond throne. A nectarous haloed moon, her passionate heart, loved all and spoke no word and made no sign, but kept her bosom rapturous secrecy, a blissful, ardent, moved and voiceless world. Proud, swift and joyful ran the wave of life within her like a stream in paradise. Many high gods dwelt in one beautiful home, yet was her nature's orb a perfect whole, harmonious like a chant with many tones, immense and various like a universe. The body that held this greatness seemed almost an image made of heaven's transparent light. Its charm recalled things seen in vision's hours, a golden bridge spanning a fairy flood, a moon-touched palm tree single by a lake, companion of the wide and glimmering peace, a murmur as of leaves in paradise, moving when feet of the immortals pass, a fiery halo over sleeping hills, a strange and starry head alone in night. So she grows up, and as we discussed, her father tells her one day that she has to go on her own quest, that nobody is going to come looking for her hand, and the Swayamvara is not really appropriate for her. Go out and find who waits for you. Go on your own adventure and quest. So she goes and she finds Satyavan, as we saw. They meet in the forest's verge, and they instantly discover that they are twin souls, and they come back to the kingdom of Ashwapati. And Narada is waiting for them there. And Narada immediately announces that this is an ill-fated marriage, that Satyavan will die in a year's time. As I said, Satyavan does not know this. Throughout the epic, Satyavan is unaware of the fact that he is going to die in a year's time. Savitri has the burden of this lonely knowledge, and she is going to deal with it and develop the power, look for the power by which she can combat it. But the conversation with Savitri's mother and Narada, the conversation between Narada and Savitri's mother, brings out the entire problem of the earth, of our condition, you see. So it's really the problem of fate, falsehood, all these kinds of things that constitute our existence. And it is in this passage that Sri Aurobindo will feel Christ. He'll actually show Christ as the shadow incarnation, perhaps, of Ashwapati, the one who came to experience, to bear the pain, who to some extent is also Ashwapati, to some extent is also Savitri, but who is the avatar of bearing the suffering of the earth. So I want to read that because that entire passage is so powerful.
Pain is the hammer of the gods to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart, his slow inertia as of living stone. If the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content, at ease, and never thought to exceed the human start, and never learned to climb towards the sun. This earth is full of labor, packed with pain. Throes of an endless birth coerce her still. The centuries end, the ages vainly pass, and yet the Godhead in her is not born. The ancient mother faces all with joy, calls for the ardent pang, the grandiose thrill, for with pain and labor all creation comes. This earth is full of the anguish of the gods. Ever they travail, driven by time's goad, and strive to work out the eternal will, and shape the life divine in mortal forms. The spirit is doomed to pain till man is free. There is a clamor of battle, a tramp, a march. A cry arises like a moaning sea, a desperate laughter under the blows of death, a doom of blood and sweat and toil and tears. Men die that man may live and God be born. An awful silence watches tragic time. Pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness, and inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty an unwilling mold. Implacable in the passion of their will, lifting the hammers of titanic toil, the demiurges of the universe work. They shape with giant strokes their own. Their sons are marked with their enormous stamp of fire, although the shaping God's tremendous touch is torture unbearable to mortal nerves. The fiery spirit grows in strength within and feels a joy in every titan pang. He who would save himself lives bare and calm. He who would save the race must share its pain. This he shall know who obeys that grandiose urge. The great who came to save the suffering world and rescue out of time's shadow and the law must pass beneath the yoke of grief and pain. They are caught by the wheel that they had hoped to break. On their shoulders they must bear man's load of fate. Heaven's riches they bring, their sufferings count the price, or they pay the gift of knowledge with their lives. So I think I'll stay with more, yeah? The sense here?
Yeah. And then we go continue right here. Yeah. Until here, yeah.
The Son of God, born as the Son of Man, has drunk the bitter cup, owned Godhead's debt, the debt the eternal owes to the fallen kind. His will has bound to death and struggling life that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score. The eternal suffers in a human form. He has signed salvation's testament with his blood. He has opened the doors of his undying peace. The deity compensates the creature's claim. The Creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven. He has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. It is finished. The dread mysterious sacrifice, offered by God's martyred body for the world. Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot. He carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed. His escort is the curses of the crowd. Insult and jeer are his right's acknowledgement. 2 thieves slain with him mock his mighty death. He has trod with bleeding brow the Savior's way. He who has found his identity with God pays with the body's death his soul's vast light. His knowledge immortal triumphs by his death. Still more, huh?
Yeah.
Hewn, quartered on the scaffold as he falls, his crucified voice proclaims, I am God. Yes, all is God. Peals back heaven's deathless call. The seed of Godhead sleeps in mortal hearts. The flower of Godhead grows on the world tree. All shall discover God in self and things. But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sin weighs on his thoughts. Its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and its powers beleaguer his tardy steps. The Titan's adversary's clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites. He is stricken with the world's pain. 1,000,000 wounds gape in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night. Antagonist forces crowd across his path. A siege, a combat is his inner life. Even worse may be the cost, dire the pain. His large identity and all harboring love shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. A dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief and make all agony in all the worlds his own. He meets an ancient adversary force. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The weeping of the centuries visits his eyes. He wears the blood-glued fiery centaur's shirt. The poison of the world has stained his throat. In the marketplace of matter's capital, amidst the chaferings of the affair called life, He is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge. That matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice, the immortal bound to earth's mortality, appearing and perishing on the roads of time, creates God's moment by eternity beats. He dies that the world may be newborn and live. He must enter the eternity of night and knows God's darkness as he knows his sun. For this he must go down into the pit. For this he must invade the dolorous vast. Imperishable and wise and infinite, he still must travel hell, the world to save. Into the eternal light he shall emerge on borders of the meeting of all worlds. There, on the verge of nature's summit steps, the secret law of each thing is fulfilled. All contraries heal their long dissonance. There meet and clasp the eternal opposites. There pain becomes a violent, fiery joy. Evil turns back to its original good, and sorrow lies upon the breasts of bliss. She has learnt to weep glad tears of happiness. Her gaze is charged with a wistful ecstasy. Then shall be ended here the law of pain. Earth shall be made a home of heaven's light. A seer, heaven-born, shall lodge in human breasts. The superconscient beam shall touch men's eyes, and the truth-conscious world come down to earth, invading matter with the Spirit's ray, awakening its silence to immortal thoughts, awakening the dumb heart to the living word. This mortal life shall house eternity's bliss. The body's self-taste immortality. Then shall the world Redeemer's task be done.
So this passage is an interlude. Sri Aurobindo introduces these deeper themes into Savitri, and this is something that comes into Narad's description of pain and what is behind it, and the fact that Savitri is a soul that has been chosen to experience the pain of her life, of the death of her husband, whom she loves and who has to contend with it. And this is again something very interesting about Sri Aurobindo's take. Normally we feel that the world has laws, and it is spiritual, true spirituality lies in being able to accept the world's laws with peace, to find some kind of vantage of acceptance. See, that if we can be peaceful with things as they are, then we've become spiritual. But Sri Aurobindo contests that. He says that what is not achieved is a sign of something we must do, and that is true spirituality. That we have to aspire, we have to keep our will and our passion alive and try to attain that which is insufficient, that which hasn't been achieved, you see. And that's what we see with Savitri. It would be very easy for her to come to a certain kind of resolution and say that, well, everybody dies, I'll at least have 1 year of bliss with the one I love, but after that I'll accept the fact that he'll die. But she refuses to accept it, and it is that refusal that mobilizes the spiritual power that can change what is established, the norm. So here after this, of course, there is the whole interlude of Savitri living with her husband in the forest, and she knows, she is burdened with this knowledge nobody else there knows, neither Satyavan nor his parents, and she broods on this in her lonely hours. So we find that here in Canto 2, Book 7, the parable of the search for the soul, page 474. As in the vigilance of the sleepless night, through the slow, heavy-footed, silent hours, repressing in her bosom its load of grief, she sat staring at the dumb tread of time and the approach of ever-nearing fate. A summons from her being's summit came. She receives this message. Above her brows, where will and knowledge meet, a mighty voice invaded mortal space. So this is something Sri Aurobindo talks about even in his own case as the Adesh, the voice that comes from a higher sphere and sometimes directs us. It seemed to come from inaccessible heights and yet was intimate with all the world, and knew the meaning of the steps of time, and saw eternal destinies changeless seen, filling the far prospect of the cosmic gaze. As the voice touched, her body became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance. The voice itself has the quality of putting her in trance. A stone of God lit by an amethyst soul. Around her body's stillness all grew still. Her heart listened to its slow measured beats. Her mind, renouncing thought, heard and was mute. And this is the voice. Why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, tied like a sacrifice on the altar of time? O spirit, O immortal energy, if 'twas to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with heart tearless eyes await thy doom. Arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, my strength is taken from me and given to death. Why should I lift my hands to the shut heavens, or struggle with mute inevitable fate, or hope in vain to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock the Saviour light and see in mind wisdom's sole tabernacle? So she's in a way repeating the argument that the mother had given to Ashwapati. We'll find these debates repeated many times. Again, we'll see these debates repeated between Savitri and death, similar debates. Is in its harsh peak and its inconscient base a rock of safety and an anchor of sleep? Is there a God whom any cry can move? He sits in peace and leaves the mortal strength impotent against his calm omnipotent law and in conscience and the almighty hands of death. The voice replied, is this enough, O spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came? This is why you are here, not to accept the status quo. Or is this all for whom thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity, a listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws? Shall there be no new tables, no new word, no greater light come down upon the earth, delivering her from her unconsciousness, man's spirit from unalterable fate? A power within her answered the still voice, I am thy portion here charged with thy work, as thou myself seated forever above. This is very interesting. You see in the Mother's prayers and meditations, a number of prayers are addressed to the Divine Mother. It is not a duality. It is the same being, as it were, in two levels, as she points out here. I am thy portion here charged with thy work, as thou myself seated forever above. Speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice, command, for I am here to do thy will. The voice replied, remember why thou camest, find out thy soul, recover thy hid self, in silence seek God's meaning in thy depths, then mortal nature change to the divine. This is the message he gives it. Yeah. And it's very interesting that, you know, this remember, the central call of remember, of memory, there is a psychic memory we all carry. This is why the Isha Upanishad ends with those powerful lines, you know, remember, O soul, remember what was done, remember. You see? So this is the remembrance that is the deepest remembrance in us. Why are we here? What is the meaning of this human life? And this is hidden by all the various layers of our ignorance, but it takes this kind of a wake-up call from above to suddenly open the doors, and she sees and remembers why it is that she's here. And that starts her off in searching for her soul, and it is what is called Canto 3, the entry into the inner countries. So whereas we found with Ashwapati this kind of rise into higher worlds, this you know, higher than mental entry into the heavens, with Savitri find this plunge within, the entry into the inner countries. And entry into the inner countries for Savitri is in a way a little different, because as we see, all these characters are cosmic sized characters. They are not human sized characters. So Savitri as a Shakti avatar, what she encounters in her inner ranges are actually cosmic forms of consciousness. She encounters Godheads and she encounters worlds which are not just individual subjective worlds, but cosmic worlds. And so she goes through these inner worlds, and then she finally comes to a place where she's entering the zone of her soul. You see, the kind of expanse of her soul. And this is where she meets three powers or Shaktis, goddess powers, that each claim to be her secret soul. These are called the triple soul powers. And now again, interestingly, as I was saying, Sri Aurobindo deliberately changes his formula. You know, in other places he's talked about the four goddesses, the four Mahashaktis. But here he will not call them the four Mahashaktis, he calls them the three triple soul forces. And each of these soul forces is a established goddess in the world right now. And so he encounters them. First one is the Madonna of Sorrows. And she is, so this is Canto 4, the triple soul forces, page 503. A woman sat in a pale lustrous robe, a rugged and ragged soil was her bare seat, beneath her feet a sharp and wounding stone. A divine pity on the peaks of the world, a spirit touched by the grief of all that lives, she looked out far and saw from inner mind the questionable world of outward things, of false appearances and plausible shapes this dubious cosmos stretched in the ignorant void, the pangs of earth, the toil and speed of the stars, and the difficult birth and dolorous end of time, of life. Accepting the universe as her body of woe, the mother of the 7 sorrows bore the 7 stabs that pierced her bleeding heart. The beauty of sadness lingered on her face. Her eyes were dim with the ancient stain of tears. Her heart was riven with the world's agony and burdened with the sorrow and struggle in time, and anguished music trailed in her rapt voice. So, this goddess is going to be speaking for the suffering of the world. She can't do anything about the suffering. She can only give her compassion, only give her love to the suffering world. So, page 504, the scream of tortured flesh and tortured hearts, fallen back on heart and flesh unheard by heaven, has rent with helpless grief and wrath my soul. I have seen the peasant burning in his hut. I have seen the slashed corpse of the slaughtered child, heard woman's cry ravished and stripped and hailed amid the bayings of the hellhound mob. I have looked on. I had no power to save. I have been pity leaning over pain, and the tender smile that heals the wounded heart, and sympathy making life less hard to bear. Man has felt near my unseen face and hands. I have become the sufferer and his moan. I have lain down with the mangled and the slain. I have lived with the prisoner in his dungeon cell. Heavy on my shoulders weighs the yoke of time. So this is the aspect of the goddess of suffering, of sorrows, the Pieta, the mother of Madonna of sorrows. And the interesting thing about Sri Aurobindo's portrayals of these goddesses is that they come with a double, a shadow. Each one of them comes with a shadow. She is in the Indian, early Indian sculptures, you find some of these goddesses standing on yakshas. Yakshas are these semi-demonic figures. They are not, the later gods will stand on the vahanas, that are the animal figures. But the earlier ones actually stand on human figures, yakshas. And these yakshas are like half human, half demonic shadows of these goddesses. And so this is the one, each one of these goddesses will come with one of these. The Madonna of suffering will come with the man of sorrows. So after she finishes speaking, the man of sorrows talks. I am the man of sorrows. I am he who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. To enjoy my agony, God built the earth. My passion he made his drama's theme. He has sent me naked into his bitter world and beaten me with his rods of grief and pain, that I might cry and grovel at his feet and offer him worship with my blood and tears. I am Prometheus under the vulture's beak, man the discoverer of the undying fire. In the flame he kindled, burning like a moth. I am the seeker who can never find. I am the fighter who can never win. I am the runner who never touched his goal. Hell tortures me with the edges of my thought. Heaven tortures me with the splendor of my dreams. So you see these doubles. Just like the Madonna of sorrows, then you'll have the Madonna of power, of might. And he will come, or she will come with her double, which is the brute. So it's the powerful Asura. And then you'll have the Madonna of knowledge, and she will come with this, the hubris of the scientist. See, the hubris of the man who's going to have all knowledge and conquer everything by his sole rational power. See, so you have these three, and Savitri, each time her gaze can see the goddess but can see through to the shadow. And each time she realizes, this is not my soul. You see? And so after the three are finished, then she talks. To each of them she says that I will return. You are not my soul. I will return and bring the power that you need. You see? So she ends, she's speaking to the Madonna of Light. She says, Madonna of Light, Mother of joy and peace, thou art a portion of myself put forth to raise the spirit to its forgotten heights and wake the soul by touches of the heavens. Because thou art, the soul draws near to God. Because thou art, love grows in spite of hate, and knowledge walks unslain in the pit of night. But not by showering heaven's golden rain upon the intellect's hard and rocky soil can the tree of paradise flower on earthly ground, and the bird of paradise sit upon life's boughs, and the winds of paradise visit mortal air. Even if thou rain down intuition's rays, the mind of man will think it earth's own gleam, his spirit by spiritual ego sunk, or his soul dream shut in sainthood's brilliant cell, where only a bright shadow of God can come. His hunger for the eternal thou must nurse, and fill his yearning heart with heaven's fire, and bring God down into his body and life. One day I shall return, his hands in mine, and thou shalt see the face of the Absolute. Then shall the holy marriage be achieved, then shall the divine family be born, there shall be light and peace in all the worlds. So this is that the soul is deeper, and it brings another very interesting aspect with regard to Sri Aurobindo's teaching, and that has to do with these goddess powers. Though there are 4 aspects that he talks about, 4 Mahashaktis, the mother of knowledge, of power, of love, and of skill, our surrender is made to the mother, the integral mother, the mother of integrality, the one who is behind all these 4. Because any one of these is only an aspect and part, and comes with the shadow of partiality. So that's the reason why one has to look for something that is behind any one of these powers or goddesses. Who is the goddess that unites them all? That is the integral divine, and that is what Savitri is looking for over here. And that is what happens in Canto 5, the finding of the soul. And what's interesting is that just like with Satyavan, when he enters the world soul, he encounters this integral zone where the he and the she are united. She does the same. She enters into her soul and she starts seeing these united powers. And so we find this page 524. Across the threshold sleep she entered in, and found herself amid great figures of gods, conscious in stone and living without breath, watching with fixed regard the soul of man, executive figures of the cosmic self, world symbols of immutable potency. On the walls covered with significant shapes looked at her the life scene of man and beast, and the high meaning of the life of gods. The power and necessity of these numberless worlds and faces of beings and stretches of world space spoke the succinct and inexhaustible hieratic message of the climbing planes. In their immensitude signing infinity, they were the extension of the self of God, and housed impassively receiving all his figures and his small and mighty acts, and his passion and his birth and life and death and his return to immortality. So it's this cycle. And again, just like with Ashwapati, she understands the meaning. The world takes on meaning for her, which was not there before. See? And as thus she passed in that mysterious place, through room and room, through door and rock-hewn door, she felt herself made one with all she saw. A sealed identity within her woke. She knew herself the beloved of the Supreme. These gods and goddesses were he and she. The mother was she of beauty and delight, the word in Brahma's vast creating clasp, the world puissance on Almighty Shiva's lap, the master and the mother of all lives, watching the worlds their twin regard had made, and Krishna and Radha forever entwined in bliss, the adorer and adored, self-lost and one. In the last chamber on a golden seat, one sat whose shape no vision could define. Only one felt the world's unattainable fount, a power of which she was a straying force, an invisible beauty, goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is a beam, a greatness without whom no life could be. Thence all departed into silent self, and all became formless and pure and bare, and through a tunnel dug in the last rock, she came out where there shone a deathless sun. A house was there, all made of flame and light, and crossing a wall of doorless living fire, there suddenly she met her secret soul. So this is the passage, and it's also very interesting. So this integrality that Savitri represents is achieved as if through a passage and through a transition. She gets out, and it's not yet a power that's established here. She represents something new. So she has to go out of whatever there exists to encounter this new power, which is her soul. So after that, she undergoes a massive transformation, and this is what Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic transformation, which is the first of the triple transformation. In her case, this is a major transformation because she is not like any other human being. It's a kind of divine psychic that is transforming her. So it's very powerfully depicted. So you see again, this happens through two phases, because that's a lot of these cases what is happening. Sri Aurobindo is describing these things realistically, because experience often comes through spurts. You have a little bit, and then for a while there's nothing, you return back to your original state, but something in you is still connected to the new consciousness. And within a few days, you may have another experience that is related to that consciousness. So that's exactly what her situation. She has this experience, she comes back to her normal self, and then in a day or so, she has another opening and the transformation occurs. So that's what we find in page 527, 528. So in 527 towards the end, you say, once more she was human upon earthly soil. Okay. Before that, she already has a union experience in the previous page, but then she comes back into her normal condition. In the muttering night, amid the rain-swept woods and the rude cottage where she sat in trance, that subtle word withdrew deeply within, behind the sun veil of the inner sight. But now the half-opened lotus bud of her heart had bloomed and stood disclosed to the earthly ray. In an image shone revealed her secret soul. There was no wall severing the soul and mind, no mystic fence guarding from the claims of life. In its deep lotus home her being sat, as if on concentration's marble seat, calling the mighty mother of the worlds to make this earthly tenement her house. Once the connection is made, then something inside you is constantly connected and constantly calling. Even when you're doing other things, there is something that is calling. As in a flash from a supernal light, a living image of the original power, a face, a form came down into her heart and made of it its temple and pure abode. So there is the descent of this power. But when its feet had touched the quivering bloom, a mighty movement rocked the inner space, as if a world was shaken and found its soul. Out of the inconscient, soulless, mindless night, a flaming serpent rose, released from sleep. It rose, billowing its coils, and stood erect, and climbing mightily, stormily on its way, it touched her centers with its flaming mouth. As if a fiery kiss had broken their sleep, they bloomed and laughed, surcharged with light and bliss. Then at the crown it joined the eternal space, in the flower of the head, in the flower of matter's base, in each divine stronghold and nature knot, it held together the mystic stream which joins the viewless summits with the unseen depths, the string of forts that makes the frail defense, safeguarding us against the enormous world, our lines of self-expression in the vast, an image sat of the original power, wearing the mighty mother's face and form. So there's this entire Kundalini experience that she has, and all the centers open up, and the power that has come from above takes its residence in each one of the chakras. And that completes her psychic transformation. And then again, just like Ashwapati, who goes through these phases of experience and night, these dark nights of the soul. So this is her personal and psychic transformation, and just after that she enters into a dark night of the soul. So this is Canto 6. Page 523. Once as she sat, well, before that, so there is a result of this experience, that is a really important result. The result of this experience is she loses this sense of being in this one life, that Kala Ratri. The sense of temporal ignorance is lost. And as a result, now she doesn't feel in the same way that Satyavan is going to die. See, these are the stages of the conquest of death. The first stage of the conquest of death is to know one's temporal eternity, that we don't really die, that there is a continuity of the soul. So once she has this experience, then she starts having a different kind of experience of Satyavan himself. This bright perfection of her inner state poured overflowing into her outward scene, made beautiful, dull, common, natural things, and action wonderful and time divine. Even the smallest, meanest work became a sweet or glad and glorious sacrament, an offering to the self of the great world, or a service to the one in each and all. It is the presence of the psychic that feels the divine everywhere, and everything is a sacrament. Happiness grew happier, shared with her by her touch, and grief some solace found when she drew near. Above the cherished head of Satyavan, she saw not now fate's dark and lethal orb. A golden circle round a mystic sun disclosed to her newborn predicting sight the cyclic ronger of a sovereign life. In her visions and deep-etched veridical dreams, in brief shiftings of the future's heavy screen, he lay not by a dolorous decree, a victim in the dismal entree of death, or born to blissful regions far from her, forgetting the sweetness of earth's warm delight, forgetting the passionate oneness of love's clasp, absorbed in the self-wrapped immortal's bliss. Always he was with her, a living soul that met her eyes with close enamored eyes, a living body near to her body's joy. But now no longer in these great wild woods, in kinship with the days of bird and beast, and level to the bareness of earth's brown breast, but mid the thinking high-built lives of men, in tapestried chambers and on crystal floors, in armored town or gardened pleasure walks, even in distance closer than her thought, body to body near to soul, moving as if by a common breath and will. So this is the interesting thing. Suddenly her inner vision has opened up to her life with him in other lives. She's no longer restricted to this life. She's seeing past and future. She's seeing their togetherness, not in this life, but in other lives, in lives to come. And that is a result of this experience. But then, once as she sat in deep felicitous muse, still quivering from her lover's strong embrace, and made her joy a bridge twixt earth and heaven, an abyss yawned suddenly beneath her heart. A vast and nameless fear dragged at her nerves, as drags a wild beast its half-slaughtered prey. It seemed to have no den from which it sprang. It was not hers, but hid its unseen cause. Then rushing came its vast and fearful fount, a formless dread with shapeless, endless wings, filling the universe with its dangerous breath. A denser darkness than the night could bear enveloped the heavens and possessed the earth. This again is a repetition of death. Death is returning. See this, so these are the various points in Savitri when death makes a appearance, and it's a prelude to the final encounter she will have with death. So he keeps coming, and now when he comes, this is a passage from the psychic to the cosmic. This is that next night, the Kalaratri, the Maharatri. Now he is in contact with the Maharatri. She is in contact with the Maharatri. And what is she going to do about it? Right? She has no power. It's more than what she has experienced so far. So then again the voice will come to her. This, as I said, the avatar's life is a progressive manifestation of her power. So the voice comes to her again. He who would, this is page 537, he who would save the world must be one with the world. And again, in a way, it's echoing that entire passage about the world redeemer. See? She has to bear the suffering of the world. She has to know what it means to be able to fight it. All suffering things contain in his heart space and bear the grief and joy of all that lives. His soul must be wider than the universe and feel eternity as its very stuff, rejecting the moment's personality, know itself older than the birth of time, creation and incident in its consciousness, Arcturus and Belphegor grains of fire circling in a corner of its boundless self. The world's destruction, a small transient storm in the calm infinity it has become. If thou wouldst a little loosen the vast chain, draw back from the world that the idea has made, thy mind's selection from the infinite, thy senses gloss on the infinitesimal's dance, then shalt thou know how the great bondage came. Banish all thought from thee and be God's void. Then shalt thou uncover the unknowable, and the superconscient conscious grow on thy tops. Infinity's vision through thy gaze shall pierce. Thou shalt look into the eyes of the unknown, find the hid truth in things seen null and false. Behind things known discover mysteries rear. Thou shalt be one with God's bare reality and the miraculous world he has become, and the diviner miracle still to be, when nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal's light. Consent to be nothing and none, dissolve time's work, cast off thy mind, step back from form and name, annul thyself that only God may be. So she's being asked to embrace that darkness, the night that comes, to cast off her sense of world. See? And so this is the second transition, the transition into the cosmic void. So she enters into the cosmic void. She casts it off. She actually, then there's this beautiful passage where Sri Aurobindo describes his own meditation, where he's watching the thoughts. She watches the thoughts and casts them out before they can come in. And he puts it so beautifully over here, that they're like ships coming, and he spots them and they sink in the ocean before they can come. And so that brings us right to the end of this passage and back to the beginning. And what happens over here is that for a while, it's again this creation of a new personality. She has to go through this complete blankness, and suddenly she feels that something is talking through her. In a way, again, it's similar to Sri Aurobindo's own experience after he had his nirvana, and he had to actually take part in the freedom struggle, and he felt that something was using him as an instrument. He had no agency himself, but he was offering himself as a spokesperson for something to talk through. And gradually a new center was built. And the same thing happens to Savitri here. She feels things talking through her, a voice coming through her, and gradually she feels that there is a presence that comes and establishes itself above her head. And she has a new station of existence. See, like this, so we find this in page 553. Something unknown, unreached, inscrutable, sent down the messages of its bodiless light, cast lightning flashes of a thought not ours, crossing the immobile silence of her mind. It ceased on speech to give those flaming shape, made beat the heart of wisdom in a word, and spoke immortal things through mortal lips. These thoughts were formed not in her listening brain. Her vacant heart was like a stringless harp. Impassive the body claimed not its own voice, but let the luminous greatness through it pass. A dual power at being's occult poles, still acted, nameless and invisible. Her divine emptiness was their instrument. Inconscient nature dealt with the world it had made, and using still the body's instruments, slipped through the conscious void she had become. The superconscient mystery through that void missioned its word to touch the thoughts of men. As yet this great impersonal speech was rare, but now the unmoving wide spiritual space in which her mind survived tranquil and bare admitted a traveler from the cosmic breadths. A thought came through, draped as an outer voice. So this will actually come and create a new center for her. It came direct to the pure perception seat, and only center now of consciousness, if center could be where all seemed only space, no more shut in by bodies, walls and gates, her being a circle without circumference, already now surpassed all cosmic bounds, and more spread into infinity. This being was its own unbounded world. In her the unseen, the unknown waited his hour. But now she sat by sleeping Satyavan, awake within, and the enormous night surrounded her with the unknowables fast. A voice began to speak from her own heart. So once again, the voice speaks to her. As it spoke, all changed within her and without. All was, all lived. She felt all being as one. The world of unreality ceased to be. So, an individual, one with cosmic self, in the heart of the transcendence miracle and the secret of world personality, was the creator and the Lord of all. Her spirit saw the world as living God. It saw the one and knew that all was He. So she has this experience due to that voice that makes her equipped, fully equipped for the encounter with death. And then book 8 is where Canto 3, Death in the Forest. So we come back full circle to the beginning, the symbol dawn, and she now goes out with Satyavan to the forest to witness his death basically. And she witnesses him dying in the forest. And death comes and she will not move. She will stick around over there. See, death wants her to move out, but she does not move. So that it ends. An awful hush had fallen upon the place. 565. There was no cry of birds, no voice of beasts. A terror and an anguish filled the world, as if annihilation's mystery had taken a sensible form. A cosmic mind looked out on all from formidable eyes, condemning all with its unbearable gaze, and with immortal lips and a vast brow, it saw in its immense destroying thought all things and beings as a pitiful dream, rejecting with calm disdain nature's delight, the wordless meaning of its deep regard, voicing the unreality of things and life that would be forever but never was, and its brief and vain recurrence without cease, as if from a silence without form or name, the shadow of a remote uncaring God, doomed to his naught the illusory universe. Cancelling its show of idea and act in time, and its imitation of eternity. She knew that visible death was standing there, and Satyavan had passed from her embrace. And then we have part 3, books 9 to 11, which is the last part of Savitri. And here we find that she will follow death and respond to him, just like we have the dialogues between Ashwapati and the Divine Mother. Here we find the dialogue between Savitri and death. So she persists over there, and finally death has to acknowledge the fact that she's there, and he can't do his work until she lets go. And so he looks at her, and this page 574. The two opposed each other with their eyes, woman and universal God. Around her, piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul, many inhuman solitudes came close. So these atmospheres, that they are like beings. These many inhuman solitudes are coming upon her soul. Vacant eternities, forbidding hope, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look, and to her ears, silencing earthly sounds, a sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed the whole adverse worlds. Unclasp, it cried, thy passionate influence, and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law, who vainly writhest, rebellious to my yoke, thy elemental clasp. Weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loved spirit's abandoned robe, pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. So she will not respond, but she will not move either. She will follow him. He continues to, wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest? Relax thy grasp. This body is earth's and thine. His spirit now belongs to a greater power. Woman, thy husband suffers. So we find that she relaxes her hold, but she will not move from there. And then she follows him, and for a while it's following death into death's kingdom, and all her senses become absent. She's going through another darkness. This darkness is a kind of a darkness of non-being, but she persists through it. She's strangled by it, but she persists through it. So finally, he calls out to her, O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home, as if thy breath could live where time must die. Think not thy mind-born passion strength from heaven to uplift thy spirit from its earthly base, and breaking out from the material cage to upbuoy thy feet of dream in groundless knot, and bear thee through the pathless infinite. Only in human limits man lives safe. Trust not in the unreal lords of time, immortal deeming this image of thyself, which they have built on a dream's floating ground. Let not the dreadful goddess move thy soul to enlarge thy vehement trespass into worlds where it shall perish like a helpless thought. Know the cold tombstones of thy hopes in life. Armed vainly with the idea's borrowed might, dare not to outstep man's bound and measured force. Ignorant and stumbling in brief boundaries spent, he crowns himself with the world's mock sovereign, tormenting nature with the works of mind. So the dread voice ebbed in the consenting hush, which seemed to close upon it, wide, intense, a wordless sanction from the jaws of night. The woman answered not. Her high nude soul, stripped of the girdle of mortality, against fixed destiny and the grooves of law, stood up in its sheer will a primal force. Still like a statue on its pedestal, lone in the silence and to vastness bared, against midnight's dumb abysses piled in front, a columned shaft of fire and light, she rose. So she will persist. And then you find that that takes us through the cantos of her debate. And first there's the journey in eternal night and the voice of darkness. And already she starts speaking and contesting his right. We find 594. When I have loved forever, I shall know. Love in me knows the truth all changings mask. I know that knowledge is a vast embrace. I know that every being is myself. In every heart is hidden the myriad one. I know the calm transcendent bears the world, the veiled inhabitant, the silent Lord. I feel his secret act, his intimate fire. I hear the murmur of the cosmic voice. I know my coming was a wave from God, for all his sons were conscient in my birth, and one who loves in us came veiled by death. Then man was born among the monstrous stars, dowered with a mind and heart to conquer thee. Which then takes us to book 10, the book of the double twilight. So these are the two twilights. One is the twilight of the ideal. So it's as if just like we have the self of mind, this is a mental intermediate zone. And then you have the twilight of the earthly real. So that is like a subtle physical. Both these are belonging to the twilights of the Swapna realm that borders either the reality of the truth or the reality of the earth. And these are the two kind of arenas where they fight out their debate. So this is book 10, Canto 2. And Death's voice sort of softens as the debate proceeds. Softens in the sense that not softens as in about to concede anything to Savitri, but softens in the sense of talking to her as an equal. He has to acknowledge her reality, where previously he didn't even want to acknowledge her. Gradually he begins to acknowledge what she's saying and actually debates with her. So, page 611. So, he's trying to tell her that you essentially lived an illusory life. You know, all this thing about love and, you know, oneness and all that was because you didn't have enough of it. If you just lived 1 year, if you really knew what love is, you would have gladly given him up. Page 611. The snake is there and the worm in the heart of the rose. A word, a moment's act can slay the god. Precarious is his immortality. He has 1,000 ways to suffer and die. Love cannot live by heavenly food alone. Only on sap of earth can it survive. For thy passion was a sensual want refined, a hunger of the body and heart. Thy want can tire and cease or turn elsewhere, or love may meet a dire and pitiless end by bitter treason, or wrath with cruel wounds separate, or thy unsatisfied will to others depart when first love's joy lies stripped and slain. A dull indifference replaces fire, or an endearing habit imitates love. An outward and uneasy union lasts, or the routine of a life's compromise. Where once the seed of oneness had been cast into a semblance of spiritual ground by a divine adventure of heavenly powers, two strive, constant associates without joy, two egos training in a single leash, two minds divided by their jarring thoughts, two spirits disjointed, forever separate. Thus is the ideal falsified in man's world. Trivial or somber, dissolution comes. Life's harsh reality stares at the soul. Heaven's hour adjourned flees into bodiless time. Death saves thee from this and saves Satyavan. He is now safe, delivered from himself. He travels to silence and felicity. Call him not back to the treacheries of earth and the poor petty life of animal man. In my vast tranquil spaces let him sleep, in harmony with the mighty hush of death, where love lies slumbering on the breast of peace. And thou, go back alone to thy frail world, chastise thy heart with knowledge, unhood and see thy nature raised into clear living heights, the heaven bird's view from unimagined peaks. For when thou givest thy spirit to a dream, soon hard necessity will smite thee awake. Purest delight began and it must end. Thou too shalt know, thy heart no anchor swinging, thy cradled soul moored in eternal seas. Vain are the cycles of thy brilliant mind. Renounce, forgetting joy and hope and tears, thy passionate nature in the bosom profound of a happy nothingness and wordless calm, delivered into my mysterious rest. One with my fathomless nihil, all forget. Forget thy fruitless spirit's waste of force. Forget the weary circle of thy birth. Forget the joy and the struggle and the pain, the vague spiritual quest which first began when worlds broke forth like clusters of fire flowers, and great burning thoughts voyaged through the sky of mind, and time and its eons crawled across the vasts, and souls emerged into mortality. But Savitri replied to the dark power, a dangerous music now thou foundest, O death, melting thy speech into harmonious pain, and flutest alluringly to tired hopes thy falsehoods mingled with sad strains of truth. This is double speak, of which we are very familiar these days. But I forbid thy voice to slay my soul. My love is not a hunger of the heart. My love is not a craving of the flesh. It came to me from God, to God returns. Even in all that life and man have marred, a whisper of divinity still is heard. A breath is felt from the eternal spheres, allowed by heaven and wonderful to man. A sweet fire rhythm of passion chants to love. There is a hope in its wild infinite cry. It rings with callings from forgotten heights, and when its strains are hushed to high-winged souls in their empyrean, its burning breath survives beyond the rapturous core of suns that flame forever, pure in skies unseen, a voice of the eternal ecstasy. One day I shall behold my great sweet world, put off the dire disguises of the gods, unveiled from terror and disrobed from sin. Appeased we shall draw near our mother's face, we shall cast our candid souls upon her lap, then we shall clasp the ecstasy we chase and shudder with the long sought God, then shall we find heaven's unexpected strain. So this is how it goes, and the debate continues. Canto 3, the debate of love and death. And page 632, we are coming close to the end of this debate. So, towards the end of page 632, this is actually this long passage which I would encourage you all to look at later, which is that Canto 3, it starts from page 629, a secret air of pure felicity. It's another one of those really beautiful mantric passages that runs from 629 through to 633. But towards its end, I read only towards its end. All our earth starts from mud and ends in sky, and love that was once an animal's desire, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, an ardent comradeship in the happy mind, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. A lonely soul passions for the alone. The heart that loved man thrills to the love of God. A body is his chamber and his shrine. Then is our being rescued from separateness. All is itself, all is new felt in God. A lover leaning from his cloister's door gathers the whole world into his single breast. Then shall the business fail of night and death, when unity is won, when strife is lost, and all is known and all is clasped by love, who would turn back to ignorance and pain? O death, I have triumphed over thee within. So this passage, of which I read only the last part, is a really eloquent passage. And Savitri, as she delivers this eloquent passage, knows that death is lost. The game is up. So that's why she ends by telling him that internally you've already lost it. O death, I have triumphed over thee within. I quiver no more with the assault of grief. A mighty calmness seated deep within has occupied my body and my sense. It takes the world's grief and transmutes to strength. It makes the world's joy one with the joy of God. My love eternal sits throned on God's calm, for love must soar beyond the very heavens and find its secret sense ineffable. It must change its human ways to ways divine, yet keep its sovereignty of earthly bliss. So, death resists still, and we are coming to the close of the debate, page 634. But Savitri replied to the dire god. So, he is saying that ultimately you are human and you are subject to the law of mortality. Yes, I am human, yet shall man by me, since in humanity waits his hour the god, trample thee down to reach the immortal heights, transcending grief and pain and fate and death. Yes, my humanity is a mask of God. He dwells in me, the mover of my acts, turning the great wheel of his cosmic work. I am the living body of his light. I am the thinking instrument of his power. I incarnate wisdom in an earthly breast. I am his conquering and unslaying will. The formless spirit drew in me its shape. In me are the nameless and the secret name. Death from the incredulous darkness sent its cry. So death, incredulous now, death is saying, I mean, how far can this go, right? O priestess in imagination's house, persuade first nature's fixed immutable laws, and make the impossible thy daily work. How canst thou force to wed two eternal foes, irreconcilable in their embrace? They cancel the glory of their pure extremes. An unhappy wedlock maims their stunted force. How shall thy will make one the true and false? Where matter is all, their spirit is a dream. If all other spirit, matter is a lie. So he's bringing up this question of the duality. See. So, there is a number of different arguments that are marshaled by death. There are different kinds of arguments, and as the debate proceeds, they grow shorter and shorter, because it is as if it is more incisive. The arguments are spent. So, we come finally towards page 663. This is death's last stand. Then death the last time answered Savitri, if truth supreme transcends her shadow here, severed by knowledge and the climbing vasts, what bridge can cross the gulf that she has left between her and the dream world she has made? Or who could hope to bring her down to men and persuade to tread the harsh globe with wounded feet, leaving her unapproachable glory and bliss, wasting her splendor on pale earthly air? Is thine that strength, O beauty of mortal limbs, O soul who flutterest to escape my net? Who then art thou, hiding in human guise? Thy voice carries the sound of infinity. he begins to acknowledge something funny is going on over here, right? Knowledge is with thee, truth speaks through thy words, the light of things beyond shines in thy eyes. But where is thy strength to conquer time and death? Hast thou God's force to build heaven's values here? For truth and knowledge are an idle gleam, if knowledge brings not power to change the world. This is it. Ultimately, everything is a matter of power. You see, and death knows that. That's the bottom line. If might comes not to give to truth her right, a blind force, not truth, has made this ignorant world. A blind force, not truth, orders the lives of men. By power, not light, the great gods rule the world. Power is the arm of God, the seal of fate. O human claimant to immortality, reveal thy power, lay bare thy spirit's force, then will I give thee back Satyavan. Or if the mighty mother is with thee, show me her face that I may worship her. Let deathless eyes look into the eyes of death, an imperishable force touching brute things, transform earth's death into immortal life. Then can thy dead return to thee and live. The prostrate earth perhaps shall lift her gaze and feel near her the secret body of God, and love and joy overtake fleeting time. And Savitri looked on death and answered not. Almost it seemed as if in his symbol shape the world's darkness had consented to heaven light, and God needed no more the inconscient screen. A mighty transformation came on her. This is the final transformation. A halo of the indwelling deity, the immortal's lustre that had lit her face and tinted its radiance in her body's house, overflowing, made the air a luminous sea. In a flaming moment of apocalypse, the incarnation thrust aside its veil. A little figure in infinity yet stood and seemed the Eternal's very house, as if the world's center was her very soul, and all white space was but its outer robe. A curve of the calm hotter of far heaven, descending into earth's humility, her forehead span vaulted the omniscient's gaze. Her eyes were two stars that watched the universe. The power that from her being's summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's lord in his control room sits. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with a golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the Eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal's will. The divine will is going to act through her. Thus changed, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. Then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness's self, or the low calm utterance of infinity, when it speaks to the silence in the heart of sleep. I hail thee, almighty and victorious death, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite, O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eatest the whole world with thy jaws of fire, waster of the energy that has made the stars, inconscience, carrier of the seeds of thought, nescience in which all knowledge sleeps entombed, and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance, thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half-conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while, be still my instrument. One day man too shall know thy fathomless heart of silence and the brooding peace of night, and grave obedience to eternal law and the calm inflexible pity in thy gaze. But now, O timeless mightiness, stand aside and leave the path of my incarnate force. Relieve the radiant God from thy black mask. Release the soul of the world called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. She spoke. Death unconvinced resisted still, although he knew refusing still to know, although he saw refusing still to see. So then she unleashes her power, essentially. The words have come to an end. See. The two opposed each other face to face. His being like a huge fort of darkness towered. Around it her life grew an ocean siege. A while the shade survived, defying heaven, assailing in front, oppressing from above, a concrete mass of conscious power he bore, the tyranny of her divine desire. A pressure of intolerable force weighed on his unbowed head and stubborn breast. Light like a burning tongue licked up his thoughts. Light was a luminous torture in his heart. Light coursed a splendid agony through his nerves. His darkness muttered, perishing in her blaze. Her mastering word commanded every limb and left no room for his enormous will that seemed pushed out into some helpless space and could no more re-enter, but left him void. He called to night, but she fell shuddering back. He called to hell, but suddenly it retired. He turned to the inconscient for support from which he was born, his vast sustaining self. It drew him back towards boundless vacancy, as if by himself to swallow up himself. He called to his strength, but it refused his call. His body was eaten by light, his spirit devoured. At last he knew defeat inevitable and left crumbling the shape that he had worn. Abandoning hope to make man's soul his prey and forced to be mortal the immortal spirit. Afar he fled, shunning her dreaded touch, and refuge took in the retreating night. In the dream twilight of that symbol world, the dire universal shadow disappeared, vanishing into the void from which it came. So this is the dramatic ending of death. There's a little bit more where Savitri is given a choice to enter into the kingdoms of endless light. This is the heliocentric zone. She's told you can live with Satyavan in that. Death actually shows his luminous face, because death is really another form of the sun god. It's the sun god putting on a shadow. So once this transformation occurs to death, it reveals its luminous form. As we were saying, the four that come. So this is really the Lord of Life who became the Lord of Death. And in being transformed, he returns back to his solar effulgence of the Lord of Life. And now he offers the last temptation to Savitri and says, I am transformed, thank you. Now I give you access to the world of endless light. You can live there with Satyavan forever. And she refuses that. And she says, I return back to earth, because it is not just for us that this victory is won, but for the earth, for the future. And they are returned to the earth to live as human beings. So that's the story of Savitri. Any comments, questions at this point? Yes.
At the end, when she asks for the boon to go back to Earth, doesn't he say, "Oh yes, I spoke through you"? He says that. Right?
I don't think he says. That's the Divine Mother said that. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. The Divine Mother said that when to Ashwapati. That would be a nice parallel, but that would steal her fire too much, you know. He's not allowed to do that. Yeah.
You know, there are so many interesting parallels from the large volume of literature that's on near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And I just am sort of
So that entire passage after she dies, after Satyavan dies, and the entry into the kingdom of death is very interesting, because the way in which he talks about the kind of journey of Savitri, and this that's, you could think about it as a near death experience, this movement through the dark tunnel, and actually for a while there is a complete loss of senses, but then the senses, she persists and the senses come back.
Yeah, it's like many times the being does not actually want to come back.
Sure.
But they are reminded of the purpose that they agreed to.
Right.
Of their soul
Yeah.
then is reminded.
Yeah. Interesting.
And this is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So fascinating. We must carry this somewhere within us,
Right. Right.
perfectly veiled,
Yeah.
so that we can play
Yeah.
our sorrow and happiness in the daily life
True.
parade.
Yeah. Ashutosh.
Sometimes I wonder, so I know you you read that the death knew that the defeat to be inevitable, right? And so Savitri shows her, when the transformation comes, and she literally obliterates the death. And so I had read this through, and then the thought has come to me. So what was the point of all this debate? Why not just get to it? Because the power is all, they just cut to the chase,
Many lines less, right? You could have abridged Savitri. Yeah. No, I think in a way the kind of debate is really a progressive manifestation of force. She has to gather force, So this is essentially, that's in a way our lives, divinity hides within us, but we don't have full access to it. We have to debate with ourselves and all the dark powers that lie within us to mobilize the divinity within, So this is a dramatization of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you also said that this is also a type of a spiritual autobiography of Aurobindo.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, it's a beautiful story, and why should Aurobindo choose this story out of Mahabharata or the Vedic to write a spiritual biography?
Yeah, I mean, you see, as I said, he first tries his hand on this story called Love and Death. So this theme is the appropriate theme through which he can work his ideas out. And I think this is the story he found from the past, which he could refashion and in a kind of a appropriate way to describe the inner life. Could it be another story? I don't know. It could, I don't know. But at least he found this. Yeah. Charles.
So, thank you first. I was reflecting on last year, Rob Hemsel, who does Savitri workshops of mantric experience, reading Savitri, or groups that have the experience of having direct darshana with the consciousness.
Right.
Behind it, last year his theme was on death. And he paired it along with the Mother's Agenda, those specific passages that really deal with her encounter and her relationship, and paired it with chapters between 9 and 11 specifically.
Right.
And also very relevant connections with Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana.
Nice.
Because there's much they say, and there's a lot that overlaps actually.
Right, right.
Very clearly, like it's sort of like, and really sort of paired them out and said, okay, when we were talking about this in Vajrayana, this is what it's representing exactly in this yoga. Now, of course, there's a difference with it, but
but Sri Aurobindo may have known about that.
Oh, he may have well. Through his own experience and nothing else, right? And certainly there was some translation there of Tibetan, but not to the degree that we see today. So, I really this thing about death is really all I want to stress is that what I experienced at that workshop is very much the living presence of it. That you can have a direct relationship and encounter with this. It's not just the story, even though it is a story, and it's a wonderful story, and it's about this, but it's about us entering into that consciousness and to really work with that transformation. So when we read it, each time we read, the mantra brings us to it, beyond the meaning of the words even. It's really the experience from behind that. So that's really the power of Savitri. We can study the story, and as Robert always says, we can learn about all these things, and that's very nice. But that's not even the real point of it. The real point is us in our relationship to that consciousness itself.
So again, I also wanted to thank you, and just to tell you that the dialogue with death brought me to reflect on, just in terms of socially what is going on and how to confront that and have a conversation with that.
Right.
I don't know where that's going, but just inspired me to look at it in a different way. That's very real, right? And I think the hopelessness that sometimes comes, that this darkness is all fading and all everlasting. Right?
Because it's the same forces that are at play in the world. And whether it comes to us as an individual experience with a loved one or something we go through, or whether it is the world situation, similar forces are at work. These forces and their extensions are at work. So yes, it is a connection in consciousness with these forces.
It struck me a lot when you said that the death and the was, or maybe it was in the passage that you were reading, but that we born out of the unconscious forces.
Today I learned the difference between ambition and aspiration. One question I have is, for someone who aspires to make a difference in business world, how some of the things that we learn here, what are some of the elements that can be taken?
So Jeff over there is somebody who can talk to you about that. It's not the area that I've grappled with.
I think if you go at business for non-material purposes, and if you go at it for your own self-development, or if you go at it to uplift other people, to provide service, help less, then certainly the benefits will come to you. But if you make a yoga out of the business itself, for your own self-development, for the development of it, then I think you can accomplish way more than the commercial interests possible.
There are certain corporations and CEOs that are known, besides beneficiaries, that make a practice of trying to be conscious in our practical. Right?
Okay. Thank you.